Hello, my name's Blossoms and welcome to another Genshin Impact video. And today we're going to be talking about damage and just how to make sure you're dealing some at least decent damage with your damage dealers, your main DPSs or your sub DPSs, as I've recently gotten a couple of comments lately talking about, hey, I'm like AR35 and I'm just not dealing damage. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. So I figured I'd make a general kind of guide of just how to build your damage dealers, just to give those people a step in the right direction. And then of course each character typically does have their own nuance, and we will talk about that a little bit here. But if you want more specifics about a specific character, you can typically check out videos on my channel, as I do create builds for different characters and I'm always making more. But before we go ahead and hop in the video, I wanted to let you guys know I am streaming at 1.5 on Wednesday, and initially I was going to do it in the evening. However, some things have changed in my schedule, and I do plan to do that at a 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the typical time that we do our Monday streams. So stay tuned for that on Wednesday, as we are going to be streaming in the morning rather than the evening like I had initially planned. Before we go ahead and get into the specifics, you are going to need to know that you're going to need to level up a couple of things on your character, and you can't really skip out on any of these if you want to deal some effective damage. However, we will kind of go in a pseudo priority, but as I said, you can't really skip out on any of these things if you want to deal some effective damage. These aspects being your level and your ascension level. Those are going to matter substantially as they increase your base stats that your other stuff scales off of. Your weapon being one of the most important things to level up, as that it also increases your base attack and gives you some nice passive slash substats. And then your artifacts, giving you all the percentages you need to make your attack as big as it can go. And then your talents, which are going to be the things that scale the actual attacks you do. All of these are going to combine together to allow you to deal some damage, and there are specifics about each of them that I want to go over. First off, let's talk about artifacts. Now, there is kind of like a formula most veteran players have kind of adopted that seems to work for pretty much most characters. And as I said, this is going to be a very general guide. So if you're a veteran player and you're still in the video at this point, I'm going to let you know that this video probably isn't going to tell you anything you don't really know. However, if you might learn something that you don't know, and if you do, then I would appreciate you letting me know in the comment section below. But yes, as I said, we've kind of got it down to a science as how to build our DPSs. Your flower and your feather are always going to be the same flat stats, so you only need to worry about their substats. However, your main stats for your artifacts are going to typically be attack percent, the elemental damage bonus of your character, and then crit rate or crit damage are going to be some of the most beneficial for your DPSs. You're typically going to want a specific crit ratio, and we'll go over that in just a moment. Now, some characters do scale differently with their damage, like Hu Tao, for example, is going to want an HP percent sans, as her skills just work off of that better, but that's going to vary character to character, and for the most part, you can just go attack percent, the elemental damage bonus, or physical damage if they're a physical damage character, goblet of choice, and then the crit rate or crit damage. Now, say you are just struggling to get an animo damage bonus goblet here, and maybe you just cannot get a crit rate helmet to save your life. We're getting a notice for the 1.5 stuff that's about to happen soon. Looks like I'm on a timer, boys. Yes, you are. Say you can't get those, you can swap those out with an additional attack percent. It is not going to be as effective as having something like the damage bonus here or the crit rate and crit damage, but having an attack percent there is still going to be, still going to allow you to deal some rock solid damage. So that is definitely an option you can go with, especially if that artifact has really good substats or something. So like maybe you just have like a really bad, damage bonus goblet in terms of the substats, but you have a really good attack percent goblet with some amazing substats. You might want to consider that one, as it could help push you over the edge on some of your stat ratios overall, and that actually might be more important for your character. But for the most part, you can just stick with attack percent, elemental damage bonus of your type, and crit rate or crit damage, and that's going to benefit you the most. Now, briefly before we get into weapons, I wanted to talk about some of those stat ratios that I was talking about, and crit rate and crit damage is going to be the one that you need to worry about the most. Typically, you're going to want 2 crit damage for every 1 crit rate, as that is typically kind of the best damage output combo that you can find, and it's a very good rule of thumb. So you see my Xiao here is 71 crit rate and 145 crit damage, meaning he has a little bit over double of crit damage as he does crit rate, meaning his damage is much more consistent than it would be if, said, maybe I had 40 crit rate and 145 crit damage. That makes a huge difference. So it's important to try and get that ratio a little bit more so than bigger crit damage. You can sacrifice a little bit of crit rate and, crit damage as long as you're trying to get that ratio as best as you can. Now, one other thing you're going to want to consider alongside those is going to be elemental mastery, as especially if your main DPS is going to be the character that is triggering elemental reactions on your team. So somebody like Xiao here, who swirls quite often, is going to deal 24.6% more damage with his swirls because his elemental mastery is at 54. Typically for main DPSs, I want to try and shoot for at least past 100 on my main DPS with elemental mastery, as that does benefit you a ton, especially if they are the trigger character. If they aren't the one causing elemental reactions, then you don't really need to worry about this stat as much, I would say, and you can focus more on your crit rate and crit damage. Now, things like energy recharge are also going to be important for your damage dealers, however, not as important as things like crit rate, crit damage, or your elemental damage bonus. Energy recharge is going to help you stay consistent though, so you do want to keep that in mind, as when you have more energy recharge, it means you're going to use your burst more, which means you're going to be outputting your burst damage more often, which can help you out a lot. Alright, so now getting into weapons. When you're thinking about weapons for a character, you're going to want to consider a few things, because weapons in this game give you base attack, and why that's different from giving you flat attack or anything is because this adds on to your character's base attack. So say Xiao has 200 base attack and I put on this deathmatch on him, then he's going to have 601 base attack, and now my attack percentage is going to scale off of that base attack value. And that's why your weapon is going to matter so much, is because it's adding to the base number that the attack percent scales off of, and that is going to help you out a ton. So higher base attack is typically going to be better. The deathmatch isn't a great example of high base attack. As you can see here, a couple of other weapons are beating it out substantially, but the reason I use my deathmatch on my Xiao is because it's giving me this crit rate substat that makes my ratios for my stats on Xiao much, much better. And then also it has a very nice passive of increasing your attack and defense, which I definitely can't go wrong with either, as it does kind of even it out a little bit for its low base attack. So when choosing a weapon, you're going to often want to consider 1, the base attack, and then 2, the substat is going to be one of the most important aspects. Typically with my weapons, I don't choose them until I have my artifacts rounded out, because of the fact that often I just choose the weapon that rounds out my stats effectively. So a lot of the times, if I am really lacking energy recharge or something, then maybe I'll pop this spear on somebody rather than something like deathmatch. If I already had good crit rate or something, it's really going to depend on that. So oftentimes I'll choose my weapon after my artifacts are kind of set in stone. That way I can round out my ratios between my stat distribution a little bit better. And one last very essential topic you're going to want to consider when you are building your DPS character is straight up the talents. These are one of the most important, I would say, artifacts on the top, weapons second, and talents being pretty much the same as weapons, because there are plenty of people that have leveled up their characters, leveled up their weapons, leveled up their artifacts, and then they're still not dealing damage and they don't know why. And well, that's because you need to level up your talents, because your talents do have these percentage modifiers, and these goes up substantially from level 1 to when you get all the way to something like level 4 here. And that is something you are definitely going to need to do. Leveling up your talents as much as you can on your main DPS is going to give you some of the highest results in terms of additional damage output. And what I mean by that is, so let's pretend my Xiao has level 6 talents across the board there, and my artifacts are pretty good. But I really want a little bit more crit rate. Well, maybe instead of farming for a little bit more crit rate on my artifacts, I might benefit on my damage a lot more if I just level up my talents, and then later I could get something like that little bit of crit rate to refine my ratios, as the talents are really that pivotal, and I cannot stress that enough. So now you basically know how to build your DPS, but I did mention there are some nuances to other characters in the game that definitely change the way that you would need to build them. Hu Tao being a prime example here, because her E skill gives her more attack based on her max HP. So when you build somebody like Hu Tao, you're going to want something like HP percent on your sands rather than the typical attack percent, but you can still see I'm following the typical formula here of, you know, percent X elemental damage bonus and then crit rate or crit damage based on my ratios. So you can see that that is very important as well, is to consider the different nuances your character has in the game and what's going to be the most beneficial. Another big suspect of this is going to be somebody like Noelle. Even if you're building Noelle as a DPS, you're typically going to want a defense percent sands here, as that is going to benefit her the most, as she gains more attack based off of her defense in her elemental burst. And that's kind of what most endgame players discuss nowadays, is essentially the small nuances in a character where they benefit more off of a, you know, more of a niche stat that goes around in their characters. So like Noelle having that defense percent, a lot of people typically try to discuss, well, is attack percent better, or is defense percent better, or is maybe X thing better? And that's typically the point of, you know, min-maxing for a lot of endgame characters. That was just like an example. I think defense percent is the best, but I just wanted to give that as an example to kind of illustrate that that's kind of what people talk about in the endgame now. But for the most part, you're always going to be fine with that typical setup of attack percent, animo damage bonus or elemental damage bonus, and crit rate or crit damage. But then you've got to consider, when you're building your main DPS, what about your substats for your artifacts? And I've got to tell you, the most beneficial substats for artifacts in the game is going to be things like crit rate and crit damage, as well as attack percent and energy recharge are going to be your top substats. And then right under recharge there, I would probably say something like elemental mastery is going to benefit you a lot, as well as elemental mastery, as we illustrated before, can help out if your character is triggering those elemental reactions. Well, that's going to be about it for the video. I'm so glad you guys could tune in. I hope this video helped you out a little bit, especially if you're a newer player and you're wondering how to deal some solid damage. I wanted to just give a small kind of beginner's guide of how to ensure that you're dealing some solid damage. And I wanted to get that out right before 1.5, before we get, you know, absolutely bombarded with a bunch of content about Yanfei or maybe the Zhongli return, as well as just the new content and the update itself. So I wanted to go ahead and get that out there. I was going to get it out yesterday, but I had some problems with my recording software, as, you know, I got a new computer recently, or I built a new computer recently, and, well, my audio was all sorts of messed up after I recorded this video the first time. So I've come back today, fixed my audio settings, and here we are bringing a video like this to you today. Anyway, I hope it really helped you guys out, and if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and comment below, as it does help out the video and I deeply appreciate it. Anyways, I will catch you guys in the next one. My name's Blossoms, and I'll catch you later. Peace.